over the tabernacle itself were several different layers of coverings. And the bottom one had colors that were woven into it. Also, you probably noticed out at the gate that there were several colors there as well. These would have been woven into a pattern. But we just have them as blocks of color so you can see which ones were used. What do you think the red represented? Blood, that's right. You know, red can also represent sin, can't it? In Isaiah 1:18 it says, though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. So we see that red represents sin and also Jesus' blood, which washes away that sin. Speaking of that, what do you think the white represented? Righteousness. Yes, righteousness and purity. That righteousness of Christ. He was pure. He didn't have any spot or blemish in him. What about purple?
Royalty.
Royalty, yes. You know, purple was an expensive dye in ancient times, and so unless you were royalty or very wealthy, you probably didn't have anything purple. What about blue?
Obedience.
Very good. You know, blue is one that most people in my tours do not know, so I have to say thank you for knowing what blue represents, and thank you to your mommy. She is teaching you very well. In Numbers chapter 15, God asked the children of Israel to sew a fringe of blue around the borders of their clothes. And he said, this is to remind you of my law and to be obedient to it. So how does this work? Well, imagine I'm one of the children of Israel, and I see this bowl sitting here, and I think, oh, I'm just going to take it for myself. And I reach out my hand to take it. What am I going to see? I'm going to see that blue. And I'm going to think, wait a minute, God's law. God's law said thou shalt not steal. I can't take that bowl. I don't want to break God's law. I want to be faithful to him. So this was a practical way that God could cooperate with the children of Israel and help them to keep his commandments. I love that about God because he doesn't just say, keep my rules or else. No, he says, this is my law, and not only will I give it to you, but I will help you to keep my law. Isn't that beautiful? Well, here in the holy place is where the priests would bring the blood of that daily sacrifice. 9 and at 3 every day, they would bring the blood of that sacrifice and sprinkle it on the horns of the altar of incense, and 7 times before the veil, bringing that record of sin into God's house. Now, when you think about sin being recorded, how does that make us feel? When you think about your sins being recorded, does it tend to make you feel a little uncomfortable, a little concerned sometimes? Did you know that the recording of sin, though, is actually a beautiful thing? Because unless something is recorded, could it ever be erased? It couldn't, could it? God keeps a record of sin so that he can say, oh, my child confessed that sin to me. I paid for that sin with my own blood. Wiped away. And then God looks at us as if we had never sinned. Wow. Well, you know, the devil likes to keep a record of sin too, because he likes to take anything God does and twist it to make us think that that's the way God is. But the devil keeps a record of sin for a different reason, though, doesn't he? He does that so that he can show it in our face and say, look what you did. Look how bad you are. Has he ever done that to you before, or is it just me? He does that to us often, doesn't he? To make us feel as if there's no way God could love me. There's no way God could forgive me. But that's not why God keeps a record of sin. God keeps a record of sin so that he can erase it. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the most holy place. But there were 3 pieces of furniture in this room that we want to talk about. This first one was called what? Does anybody know? That's right. The table of showbread. 2 stacks of unleavened bread. 6 loaves in each stack. And 2 crowns of gold around this table that was covered in gold. And the priests were told to bring in the hot, fresh bread every Sabbath day and place it before the Lord. And they were to put frankincense on top of it. I imagine that frankincense might have helped to preserve the bread through the week until it would be eaten on the following Sabbath day. Once they had replaced the bread, they would eat the old bread. And God told them to eat all of it. That was one of the jobs that the priests did in this room. Well, the bread was to be always before the Lord, and something else that was to be always before the Lord was over here. What was this called? That's right, the altar of incense. And And they would take hot coals from the altar of sacrifice and put on them a special combination of sweet-smelling spices and resins that would burn in a fragrant smoke, creating a beautiful scent that would fill this room and even go over the most holy place to where God was. And God told the children of Israel that none of them were to make this special incense in their houses. It was just to be used in God's house. But you know, when a scent is in a room, it doesn't just stay there, does it? It likes to spread through the air. So I imagine that incense must have spread even into the camp. So when the children of Israel smelled that smell, they knew that it came from God's house. Isn't that neat? Well, over here was another thing that was always going on in God's house. And who knows what this piece of furniture was called? It had fire, you're right. This was the candlestick or the lampstand. And it was made of a solid piece of gold. A talent of gold. That's a lot. And it was hammered into this beautiful design. With flowers, with knobs, and these bowls on top were to be filled with olive oil. That was to be the fuel for the lamp. And so the job of the priest was to refill those bowls and to keep the wicks trimmed and burning. Imagine the light of that candlelight flickering on all the gold in this room. That must have been so beautiful to look at. So bright in here. Well, you know, we saw Jesus' story in the courtyard. Do you think we can see Jesus' story in the holy place? Absolutely, yes. You know, what does Jesus say about himself and bread? That's right. He said, I am that bread of life. So we see Jesus represented here in the bread. But there's 2 stacks of bread and there's 2 crowns of gold. Huh. Well, who is equal with Jesus? God the Father, you're right. You know, Jesus was talking with the disciples one day, and Philip said, Lord, show us the Father. And Jesus said, have I been with you so long and you haven't seen me? He said, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. I and the Father are one. He said, we are equal. We are the same. Here we see Jesus and God equal in their kingship, their authority over the universe. You know, when Jesus went back up to heaven, he said that he would sit at the right hand of the throne of God. And here we can see that represented in the table of showbread. There's another thing that Jesus went up to heaven to do for us, represented here. What does incense represent in the Bible? Do you know?
Prayers.
Prayers, that's right. That incense represents prayers. It was to be continually burning, and we are told to pray without ceasing. And in the Psalms, in Psalm 141, verse 2, David says, let my prayer be set before thee as incense. So we can see this connection between incense and prayer. Well, our prayers don't get up to heaven on their own, right? We can't just deliver them to God. So we need someone to deliver our prayers for us. That's what Jesus went back up to heaven to do. He is our mediator. You know, we have